Hello, Carol. How are you?
Hi, it's a pleasure to connect.
I'm glad to have you.
Hi, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning into the OTC Club today. We have a special guest. You all know her as Carol J.S. Ross. Oh, Ross. Huh? If you don't already follow her, please hit the follow button. So, Carol, hi.
He- Hello, Miss Dahl. Thank you so much. And to the whole OTC Club for having me on my first Twitter Spaces. I'm a Twitter
Yes.
Spaces virgin. So thank
Oh, my
you for
goodness.
popping my Twitter Spaces cherry. And by the way, this is how this discussion is going to go, just setting the tone right from the top.
And I love it. That's me. So, Carol, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us something that you may have not have told some people out there. Give us some good stuff. Give us the juice.
The juicy details. All right. Well, the kind of the short overview is that I am a recovering investment banker, an entrepreneur, and I play myself on television. I am the author of a new book called The War on Small Business, which I know we will get into later. I speak, I invest, I sit on boards of directors, and most importantly, I have a fashion doll slash action figure created in my own likeness.
Wow, I love it. An action figure, that is sick.
You have an action figure in your likeness?
I sure do. One of my clients is a toy company that manufactures collectible dolls, kind of like a fancy B word doll. We don't say her name, but you all know the brand. But kind of at a couture level. And I have been their outsourced chief customer officer for like 16 years. And when I wrote my first book, the feedback from some of the buyers at the time was that I was too attractive to be taken seriously as a business author. So they needed to ugly me up or pull me off the cover.
Wow.
And so I said, I'm going to do the biggest FU possible. And so I had my clients create a fashion doll slash action figure in my own likeness. And we used it as a premium to help market the book the first time around. So you can Google it if you just put in Carol Roth action figure, Carol Roth doll, you can see it. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Wow. I
Good.
wish that me and Doll would have an action figure made out of us in the
Oh,
future. So your goals.
yes, she is gold. And
So I
Archie
do,
too.
yeah, and I do want to ask you. So you said that you used to be an investment banker. Can you go into that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So as I always say, I'm a recovering investment banker. It's like a 12-step program, and I'm somewhat permanently stuck around step 11. But where I started out, and just to give you kind of a little bit of background before then, is that I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. My dad was an electrician. My mom was a stay-at-home mom turned sort of hobby entrepreneur later in life. And so I got the opportunity to go to Wharton undergrad, this incredible undergraduate business program, but my parents didn't have any money to send me. So I had to work and I had to take on a lot of debt, which is obviously the story that a lot of people can relate to. And back in the day, 1995 is when I graduated. I had $40,000 in debt. And so I had to pay it down because that was sort of the agreement with my dad. You know, if you're going to take on this debt, you have to pay it down quickly. And there were two kind of routes to go. One was to go into management consulting, which is for people who like to have a really deep dive and know everything about something. And for people who have ADD and like to do like a million things at once, they go into investment banking. So clearly I was going to go into investment banking and be able to work on a lot of deals at one time. And I think when people hear the phrase investment banker, it sort of gets conflated with a lot of different functions on and related to Wall Street. So I was in the arena that was called corporate finance. And what I did was I helped growth companies raise capital and do mergers and acquisitions, mostly to help grow their businesses. So if you have eaten at a cheesecake factory or a Papa John's Pizza or an Einstein Noah Bagel Company or P.F. Chang's or Wolfgang Puck or any of those were companies that I helped to raise money so that they could expand their businesses and they could bring them to a location near you. So if you gained a bunch of weight eating at the Cheesecake Factory, I played a very small role in
Well, thank you for that.
Yes.
You
Oh,
said something about.
and I should
Go
mention
ahead.
too, just from a scope perspective. So over the course of my career, I've done billions of dollars worth of transaction work, and as I said, I'm always sort of brought in to still weigh in on deals or kind of do something deal related because it's in my blood, even though it's not the area that I focus on.
Oh yeah, so you're the real boss. But so you mentioned Wharton Business School, uh, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia.
Philadelphia,
Yeah,
PA.
that's where I'm from originally. So I had to shout you out.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, okay, so what's your go-to cheese stick?
Oh, no, Jim's. I'm not a Pat's or Geno's person.
All
I go
right,
to Jim Steak
I
or
like it.
Ishkabibbles.
Nice,
Ishkabibbles. Yep.
love it.
So, yep. So now all of our guests. I mean all of our audience in here. Most of them trade stocks and crypto. I wanted to know: do you trade any stocks or any crypto? Any?
So I consider myself an investor versus a trader, and I think they're very different disciplines. I'm looking at capital preservation and long-term, sort of a risk-adjusted return versus total return. Up until like the last 10 years, I was very deep from my background in investment banking into valuation. I could do a discounted cash flow analysis, in my sleep, and I built a lot of models and whatnot. Obviously, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in a bit, but with all the disruption of risk that the Fed has brought into the market, that has been more difficult to do. But I still do have, sort of that longer term outlook. So, I'm not looking to make that quick turn or to look at a chart and say, oh, this is breaking through over here. Although, appreciate the people who do. I just have a sort of a different discipline based on my background and kind of where I stand in life.
Yeah. Oh wow. So I was putting out the emojis, right, and I was looking for the heart eyes emoji, and they just didn't have it because yeah, I absolutely love everything you just said. You know, we're degenerate gamblers. A lot of us in here.
Oh my god. Speak for yourself.
I love to say that. I love to say that. You
But
maybe.
that's important. It's important to
Yeah.
know your risk tolerance. And so I'm the
Mhm.
person who goes to Las Vegas and is like, well, if I'm going to lose $500, I'm going to the spa. Like I'm the whale for the spa industry, whereas other people are the whale at the table, right? So you just have to kind of know what your risk tolerance is and what your discipline is. And like I'm really good at making an educated guess. So when I recommend a stock, like usually it's like, okay, this seems like really ridiculous, based on valuation or whatnot, which is why I don't do that very frequently.
Wow. All right, Carol. So let's go into about like your book that you just released. Can you tell the audience and us about that?
Yes. So the book is called The War on Small Business. And it's crazily enough like the most underreported and important story of the last 16 months because it really delves in to the fact that the government of the United States picked winners and losers. They were decided who was going to thrive, who was going to fight to survive, who was essential, and who was, and I cannot believe the government had the nerve to say this to anybody, but who was labeled non-essential. And they did all of this not based on data and science, but based on political clout and connections. And what this enabled was the most historic wealth transfer that we have ever seen from Main Street America to Wall Street at levels of epic proportions. I mean, we saw 7 tech companies gain $3.4 trillion in value in the year 2020. At the same time, we had hundreds of thousands of small businesses that were basically murdered, and millions more that were struggling to survive. So that's kind of the thesis, but it really backs into a bigger thesis, which I think fits into the crypto discussion and also the markets discussion about the fight between decentralization and centralized power and what that means for economic freedom.
So you tell us a little bit about wealth creation in your book. Can you go into a little bit more detail on wealth creation and the opportunities?
Yeah, so I mean, this is really the important point that I think everybody should be paying attention to, and I kind of walk in through the door of small business, but it really applies more broadly. When I think about economic freedom and wealth creation opportunities in this country, or really any country, but particularly the United States, it really is about ownership. It's about having equity, and I mean financial equity, not it's kind of the broader definition of equity, but financial equity and ownership in assets. And if you think about what has been happening, and certainly what was accelerated over the last 16 months, is really this tamping down on wealth creation opportunities. So certainly you can build equity in your own small business, and potentially, and we've seen people do that, sometimes those become the biggest businesses in the world, and the government's made it riskier and more challenging to do that. You can gain equity through investments, like in the stock market. Obviously, the Federal Reserve and their intervention in the market in terms of artificially suppressing interest rates, as well as their just maniacal continued printing of trillions and trillions of dollars. And for those of you who aren't as familiar with the Federal Reserve, when I say printing, it's really, they don't actually even print it. It's really an accounting entry. So they're making up money from nowhere, and they're using it to go out and buy securities and put them on their balance sheet. Now, if we made up money out of nowhere on our balance sheet and went to buy things, we would call it counterfeiting. But for some reason, they're allowed to get away from it. But the outgrowth of this intervention and this money printing is disrupting risk in the market. It's making it more expensive for you to invest in terms of stocks. It's inflating the assets. And if you want to put your money in the bank and do something that's less risky, you're getting basically no return on your money. So it's a really big issue in terms of disrupting another wealth creation opportunity. And then what's happening is, as I said, the savers and the spenders, the savers and the retirees and people who are trying to put their money into the bank, and they're basically earning no interest on it. The same time, the banks are lending out to these big companies more and more capital at ridiculously low interest rates that they're using to go out and compete not only with small businesses, but things like competing with the average American to buy their own houses. I mean, we've seen this in the news from these private equity firms that are going out and competing to buy houses. So now it's more difficult for you to buy a house. So looking at all of these ways that you can create wealth through home ownership, through stock ownership, so on and so forth, they're continually disrupting the wealth creation opportunities in the United States. And that is something that should be a concern for all of us, because it impacts the ability to become wealthy and that economic freedom to pursue what it is that you want to pursue.
Carol, so you talk about like them disrupting the wealth opportunities for all of us. Can you explain the mindset of that we should have to, just know the difference of when we're getting got to, you know, to not being able to, um, you know, be fooled by them?
Yeah, I mean, it's the education piece on this. Just one of the reasons why I wrote this book is to really kind of take these very wonky, difficult, opaque concepts that people don't know that much about, and try to break them down in a way so that you understand them better, you know what to look out for, and you can see what's happening, because it's hard to stand up and educate other people, or even make a call to a representative if you don't have sort of that baseline understanding. And again, it's intentionally opaque. Like they're making it hard for the average person to understand because they don't want you to understand that. So I think that's one piece of mindset that's really important. I think from a broader wealth creation standpoint, I think that mindset is incredibly important. And Dell and I were having a conversation offline and talking about kind of the way that we were raised. And one of the things that I give my parents and especially my dad so much credit for is like I was raised with no limitations, like no limiting mindset. It was an abundance mindset. You could do whatever you want. You're an individual. Anyone else's success doesn't impact your success. Rising tide lifts all boats. And oh, by the way, if you haven't figured out, I am female, but it was never sort of brought to my attention until much later in life. So I never sort of considered myself like a female investment banker or a female this or whatnot.
Yeah.
And so, so much of the mindset that you have going in to what you can do, I think impacts your outcome. So if we as individuals start putting onto other people, the soft bigotry of low expectations, as they call it. Oh, well, you couldn't possibly do that. Oh, you're a victim. Of course, they're going to think that way. And they're going to carry that around with them and they're going to walk that way through life. But if you're encouraging to people and you show them the path of how they can take hold of wealth creation opportunities, they're going to walk through life that way as well. So we have the intersection right now of this challenging environment where the government is making it harder for people to get wealthy. At the same time as we want to be abundant. So one of the things I've been advising people is that if you have a job, you don't own your own business, but you have a job right now or you're thinking about going into the workforce, now is the best possible time that you have to negotiate. So even if you like your job, still shop around, see what else is out there. And the most important thing you can do is you can ask for equity. So look at companies that have options packages and equity grants and give you ownership and participation and the upside growth that you're creating at that company. And it's a shift in the mindset because you might have to give up a little bit of your income, but income isn't wealth. And if you want to really create wealth long term, you should be looking at, how do I participate in the upside? It's a much bigger opportunity. And funny enough, with a lot of companies, because they don't have to budget the same way, for giving you an options grant as they do to give you like a couple extra $1,000 each year. Sometimes it's actually easier to get options or a higher option grant out of a company and to negotiate that. So now is a really good time, given the tightness in the labor market. 9.2 million jobs that have been unfilled, record number of people quitting and changing jobs. Like now's a good time. And as I said, even if you like the job that you already have, still go out and do it and just think to yourself, like, what's the crazy package? Like, what's the most insane thing I could possibly want that I would never ask for if I actually needed this job? It gives you the flexibility because you don't need the job to go out and ask for that. And you'll be shocked at what you can negotiate right now.
Yeah, like, it's all in the power of now, right?
It
So,
is, right? Well, it's power now. It's
mhm,
also the power of the long term, right? So
yeah.
thinking about that long term wealth creation
Hmm.
instead of just like how many dollars am I capturing today?
Exactly. So we talk about your book. In your book, you talk about the free market. I believe that's chapter 12. Can you go a little further into your views on the free market?
Yeah, so this is really important, and I think kind of sets up the decentralization discussion very nicely. So, most people, when I say small business, I think people think it's like a niche and it's kind of an insignificant piece of our economy. And that couldn't be further from the truth. If you think about a spectrum or a pie, you basically divide it down the middle. About half the GDP and about half the jobs sits with small businesses. which before COVID was 30.2 million small businesses and about 99.9% of all business entities. And they really look more like the free market. When I talk about free markets, or capitalism, it is freedom, choice, transparency. People not being forced to do anything, but just their transactions done freely, directing the resources. So that's what I think about. And I think that small business is a really good approximation of that in our economy. Now, the other half, so we have 30.2 million small businesses on one side for half the economy. The other half of the economy, depending on how you count them, is in the hands of 10 to 15,000 big businesses. So 30.2 million on one side, 10 to 15,000 on the other side. So it is highly concentrated. And this is where the issue comes in terms of how we have moved towards kind of free market to more central planning. And central planning, I look at, I don't care if you want to use the word socialism, democratic socialism, communism, Fred, whatever you want to call it. I use central planning to say it is a handful of people who are making decisions on behalf of the masses using force, control, coercion, and usually opacity. And if you think about if you are trying to gain power as a central planner, what are you going to do? Are you going to try to go to the half of the economy where there's only 10,000 big businesses that have a lot of money and a lot of lobbying power and are much easier to strike deals with and to engage in that cronyist behavior? Or are you going to try and round up 30.2 million small businesses? I think that, that ends up being super clear. And what ends up happening when we get this concentration that becomes such a big part of our economy is that you do get more cronyism, and that marches into more central planning, and you get a government that has more purview, more spending, more laws, and creates a situation like they did over the last 16 months, but really it's been going on for decades, where the little guy, no matter what they say, always gets the short end of the stick. So I think it's really important for people to kind of understand these underlying principles and understand the dynamics, because a lot of times things are sold as, oh, this is going to be great for the little guy. I mean, think about the last financial crisis that we had, when we had financial institutions who took on too much risk, and it disrupted the entire economy, not just here in the US, but worldwide. They came back and said, well, as the slap on the wrist, first of all, they said they're too big to fail, right? They're going to bail them out, even though it was, bad behavior. But then they said, we're going to regulate them, and they're going to put forward Dodd-Frank. And as I talk about in the book, the Dodd-Frank regulation, which was meant to rein in the big banks, ended up killing the formation of community banks and other small banks. A lot of smaller banks went under. Small business lending fell off a cliff. And lo and behold, the big businesses had less competition. They increased big business lending. And so the big businesses and the big banks ended up getting free rein, and the small guys ended up getting screwed over once again. So it's really important to understand the outcomes, because a lot of times the intentions sound good, and it's always sold that they're looking out for the little guy. But if you really want to look out for the little guy, that comes with freedom and choice and transparency, whether that is in the markets. I know a lot of you are crypto enthusiasts, and I think that that's a reason that draws many of you towards crypto. Certainly is the case for small business, and that's why I've been trying to create a through line through all of these people who believe in decentralization, because it really is the same fight and the same battle that we're all going up against.
Wow. That's amazing. And when you touch on decentralization, can you go into that a little bit before we go into questions from our panel with how that applies into investors in general with stocks and crypto, with just decentralization in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I was alluding to, decentralization is a representation of more freedom and more choice. So if you're on that spectrum from central planning to free markets, you want to be on that decentralized side and you want to be on the free market side. So if you think about the Federal Reserve, I mean, they're the ultimate central planners, and their actions and the things that they have dictated and mandated have consolidated wealth. We do now have, I think it's 5 tech companies that last I checked, obviously the stocks move every day, but are around $9 trillion in value, concentrated within 5 companies. And a lot of that increase, foots almost directly to the amount that the Fed has printed. So this is not intervention that's, flowing out to Main Street. So, that becomes an issue. And I think that small business is the answer to a decentralized economy, just like the gig work is a answer to decentralizing the corporate job, just like what you guys are doing here in terms of the creator economy is an answer to the sort of mainstream media corporate press that controls, all of the information. Now we're seeing the
Absolutely.
decentralization push against that, right? And crypto as well as and DeFi. Those are pushbacks against the Fed and Wall Street and the destruction of the dollar. And so I think that when we're looking towards freedom and choice, it really does sit hand in hand with that concept of decentralization. And really everything that we evaluate should be looked at from this point. Like, do we have a handful of people making decisions, or is this free choice? And how does that end up impacting our economic freedom, our wealth creation opportunities, and just our overall freedom?
Wow. So, Carol, we talked again. We talked about your book, and we talked about small businesses. So, where can we find this wonderful book that you have created and shared some things for us today? From
Yeah, so I think if you want to continue to get educated about these concepts, and it's really important based on what's going on right now, I would encourage you to pick up the book. I like to walk the talk, and I like to encourage people, if we're going to focus on freedom and choice, you need to be more focused on how you spend your dollars. Are you spending your dollars to support small businesses, or are you going and helping that consolidation of power? So I'm a capitalist. If you find value in the big companies, I think that's great. But if you want to put your dollars somewhere else and try to keep that playing field a little bit more level, there's a really cool site called bookshop.org. Bookshop.org. And what they'll do is they'll fulfill your book from a local small business bookseller. So you get to not only support small business advocacy and educate yourself, but you also get to support a small business bookseller in the process. So that's my recommendation, but certainly not a mandate.
That's right,
And
everybody. You heard it. Support small businesses. And that's what, can you repeat the website one more time, Carol?
Yes, bookshop.org.
It's easy. Bookshop.org. Go ahead and get her book.
what's a bookshop these days? I'm just kidding.
So listen, listen, you're such a hipster, Christine.
But
You
that,
used to
but
go
that's
to
the
those
cool thing, is
bookshops.
that you don't actually have to even walk in if you don't feel like it. You can still do it from your phone or from the internet. I mean, the best thing is to walk in, right, and actually
Right.
support your local small business bookseller. But this is the hybrid of, you can still be lazy at home
Right.
and still have the good outcome as well.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
thank God, right? Because if we didn't have that, like bookshop.org, then where are we going to find these freaking books?
yeah, right.
Um,
Because you don't look for small bookshops anymore.
right.
Have your coffee and be a hipster. Hmm.
Anyway, Carol, so where you're so full of information. Do you have like a mentorship or classes or anything, or a website?
So Twitter is my mentorship. I mentor people
Oh,
on all
same, same,
things
same.
finance and pop culture on Twitter. But what I will say is, I just have this philosophy. I'm a helper. I like to be helpful. So if you have a specific question, please reach out to me via my website at carolroth.com. There's a contact form, and I'm happy to be helpful. What I will tell you, I'm going to help you get the most help, whether it's from me or from somebody else, is that the more specific you can be on what you need help with, and how someone can help, and the easier you can make it for them, the better the outcomes you're going to get. Because people in general, I find, want to be helpful, but they're not going to do all the brainstorming for you, and they're not going to like try and read your mind. So, and also, by the way, you can also reject whatever it is that they tell you, right? This is just information and helps to inform your own decision points. You have to live with whatever decisions you make. So, the more that you can bring to the table, the better it will be. And I will also say about mentorship, because I've had so many people, come to me over the years like, "Oh, will you be my mentor?" And the reality is that's not the way mentor relationships tend to work, or to work effectively. One is that most people don't have a one-off mentor. They have what one of my friends calls the 5-minute mentors, which again is like a piece of information, maybe a question you've asked via my email, or something that you've seen on Twitter, or an article you've read, or a book you've read, and you take all of that in from people's thought leadership and the information they're putting out there, and those become in collectively your mentor. In isolated situations, you grow an organic relationship, and it turns into a mentoring relationship. So right now, I do have somebody who I consider my mentee, and he came to me when he was a teenager. I think he was about 16 years old, which, by the way, the
Oh,
earlier you can
wow.
start, the better, because people are
Yep.
always more sympathetic to
True.
people
Yeah.
who are young, right? And he's like, "I want to be an investment banker. What should I do?" And I was like, "Wow, that's crazy. Okay." And so I gave him a list of things he should do, going on YouTube, learning how to do a discounted cash flow analysis, learning how to do a comparable company analysis, learning, financial accounting, just kind of like some basic things. Going printing out S1 registration statements and 10Ks and 10Qs, and getting familiar with it, all these kinds of things. And he was like, "Okay, great." And so he's like, "If I have questions, can I come back to you?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So from time to time, he would come back, and he would ask a specific question about, "Hey, I'm working on this model or whatever, and I'm not quite understanding this." And so I would get asked, kind of another question. And like, he always did it. I mean, that's the other thing, is like, he was the one who was driving the mentor relationship, because he was continually asking these questions. And over time, I became really invested in him. And finally, it came time for him to apply for investment banking positions. And I was like, "Yeah," and I made introductions, and he ended up getting a job, which of course happened to start like concurrently with COVID. So as an analyst, he
Oh,
had his
wow.
first year kind of work from home. And that's, he's come to me with all these other challenges. But like, I'm super, like, he's definitely my mentee, but it was never a formal ask. It was something, it was the outgrowth of a personal relationship, where he came back, he asked for small bits of my time, small questions. We grew the relationship. And of course, I became vested in his success. And so I would just use that as a model and see where the relationship goes. And sometimes you'll find that fit. And if you don't, it's okay. Using those 5-minute mentors are a great, yeah.
That's amazing. You had no idea. It was so organic, like it was so organic. You had no idea that that was your first mentee.
No, he like wiggled his way into my life, right? So, and I've had other people who I've mentored in kind of smaller capacities, but like, this is like a really solid, like, I'm like so proud of him and all of the things that he's done, and we've navigated through issues together, and it's like, oh, like I feel so proud, like a proud parent. So,
I'm proud of him just because you mentioned him
oh,
vicariously through you.
yeah, he's fantastic. He's really a go-go. He already is a huge success. He's gonna be a huge
Yeah, I
success.
mean,
Yeah.
just by him going and asking you those questions so young, and then the follow through is what takes the
Yes.
cake. That
It
is what makes successful people. That
Thank
consistency.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll tell you. So that's another thing, is I get people all the time, oh, by the way, who come to me for investment banking things, and I've told them the same stuff as them, and they didn't do any of it. So, yay for him for, not only like taking the advice, acting on it, and then following up. So really he drove, like he always says, like, oh, thank you so much. Like you've helped so much. And I'm like, but no, like you don't understand. Like you're the one that's driving this, because I can just, I say interesting things all the time that could impact people, and people ignore 99.9% of what I say until it's too late. So, this is really his success story, not mine.
I mean, just you telling me, I mean, that's just beautiful. I wish I met you when I was 16.
Sounds like you've done pretty well for
Oh
yourself.
yeah, I've done pretty good. You know that whole overcoming everything situation. But yeah, so I have a kind of a cool. So we're going into questions with the panel now, you guys. But I have like a cool question to ask you. I want to pick the genius's brain,
Okay, no
and
pressure, no pressure.
I want to know right now because I'm into music. What is your favorite song right now?
What is my So here's the thing with me is all of my pop culture references are like usually like kind of concentrated in the 80s and 90s, and then like
Yes,
every
yes.
once in a while. So I go through phases, and I also ask these pop culture questions on Twitter. So I asked this question about favorite Stevie Wonder songs a couple weeks
Oh my
ago.
God.
And so I've been just in like a Stevie Wonder loop, and then R&B happens to be my favorite genre. So I also then always like kind of get into like Return of the Mac, and like then it just starts like
Oh my
devolving
God.
from there. So I spend a lot of time, like right now I was like with Stevie in like the 70s, and then kind of hit like some of the R&B of the 90s. So that's kind of where I am mentally right
So
now.
you're not going to believe this because I was just listening to Do I Do. What do I do? My
Love it.
love to you.
So all right, so you'll appreciate this story, is that so one of my favorite R&B songs is a song called One Woman Man by Dave Hollister. And this is a song that, like, if you follow R&B, you definitely know, and if you don't, you probably haven't heard of before. And so I had this internet technician, like my internet was down, came out, and he was like wanted to test like the volume levels and make sure that the connection was correct. And he's like, okay, can you just play whatever's on YouTube? And then I just like crank up the Dave Hollister, and like the look on his face, like, what's this girl doing listening to Dave Hollister? I'm like, don't mind me. I'm all kinds of things. But if you haven't heard of One Woman Man by Dave Hollister, it's a really good
I have definitely
Wow.
heard of it, and
song.
and I believe people who listen to all different type of music, they're definitely geniuses because that is totally me. But you guys, do you have any questions? The panel, do you have
Yes,
any questions?
Carol. You got my mind racing right now, so
I love it.
I'm gonna try to be quick here and get to the point. First and foremost, my first thing, how do I get a signed copy of your book?
Okay, so this is the way I'm doing it, because like COVID has disrupted everything. Is that buy the copy of your book through your local small business bookseller, support them, and then drop me a note at that contact form at carolroth.com. Just hit contact, and it'll come through to my team, and just say, hey, I want a signature, and here's where to send it. And then what I do is I have these signed book plates from my publisher, and I'll do a custom signature, and then I'll just shoot it in the mail to you, and you can plop it right in there. So it makes it easy breezy. Everything, the small business gets the support, and you can get, all right, pretty much whatever you want.
Beautiful. And then where my mind's racing. So I'm 24 years old. I've been investing, trading OTC, big boards, trying to save capital,
Yep.
looking for a home. Currently living in Chicago, Illinois. Um,
Ah, do you know that
pl-
that's where I live?
I did not, but I
Yes,
love it.
she's in the shop
Now,
I'm a
now,
town.
do you like, all
Chi-Town
right,
gal. Where are you at, Matt?
Lou Malnati's or Giordano's?
Malnati's.
Thank you. Okay, a lot of my
Yeah.
friends go the other way, but
No. Me and
so
Lou, we have a long-term
yes,
relationship. My husband knows
thank
all
you.
about it. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I'm addicted. But
So where
where
are you in the city?
Lincoln Park.
Okay.
So, anyways, where I was going at is, so I'm assuming that me personally, and I could be totally wrong, but with everything going on, rates, different things, I'm seeing foreclosures coming. Does that align with your thinking?
Oh boy. Okay. So there's like two different aspects to this. There is definitely foreclosures coming, but probably more on the corporate side than on the personal side at the same time that we have the potential for a lot of inflation, which is going to you kind of raise asset prices. So you're going to have a lot of people with capital to deploy probably going, what are the kinds of hard assets that, I should be locking up my money in? And that's probably things like houses. So, I wish I had that crystal ball to tell you, is it a good time or is it not a good time? You're so young. It's hard to peg. But if you think about what happened out of the '08 financial crisis, and I'm just kind of spitballing here, is that obviously there were a ton of foreclosures then, and it kind of cleared out all of the inventory over the last decade or so, which is one of the reasons why it's so hard to find a house now. And when you think about the debt that's been given away, it's very heavily corporate weighted versus personal weighted. Like I know a lot of people with really good credit who might be like business owners or whatnot, who are having a really hard time like getting mortgage approvals, which is insane. So I think it's like if you're looking at corporate property, I definitely think there's going to be a huge disruption, and that could then set the entire economy off in a different direction, and then obviously all the things kind of tumble from there. But and please come back at me if you have like kind of a different angle on this, and because again I'm kind of just thinking about this as we're talking, but I don't see as much like I don't think that where the risk in the market is like people taking on crazy amount of mortgage debt. And if you think about like the last financial crisis with the mortgage-backed securities, they're doing instead of the collateralized debt obligations for mortgages, they're doing collateralized loan obligations now for corporate debt. So I just see like a lot of the risk. In my book, I think we were up to like almost $18 trillion of non-financial corporate debt. So I'm seeing it more. And if you think about also personally, what's happened, personal saving rates are at pretty high levels, definitely higher than average. People paid down a ton of debt with all the stimuluses. So I'm just not, I don't know. I don't know that I'm seeing it as much on the personal side as the corporate side. Is that different than what you're thinking?
I wouldn't think that it would be immediate, but I'm thinking on like a year to 2 year span because I mean, if you look at so like let's talk about building a home right now. It's ridiculous. All the materials are going through the roof. People are slowing down buildings. And I worked closely with an exterminating company that did a lot of Section 8 living in the city in Chicago, and that's government paid living, and people are getting evicted out of these properties that are paid by the government because there's just no funding for them. So they're getting taken straight from government housing to the streets, and no one's talking about it, which makes me think, we're really pushing our dollar here. And
Yeah,
I'm
but
like, I'm
I
like,
think you're going to be compete. I think for that kind of stuff, those big tracts of properties, you're going to be competing with the things that people are competing with now, with the Black Rocks of the world,
exactly,
for
Vanguard's
big
buying up
things.
everything,
Yeah. So in terms of
exactly.
kind of like personal foreclosures on kind of like again, because the supply is so low and the demand is so high, I'm just not sure that kind of tanks the prices, especially with inflation and whatever. I mean, again, so many different variables right now. I could be dead wrong, but those are some things that you should definitely think about and at least investigate.
Awesome. Well, no, I really do appreciate your perspective.
Yes, and by the way, I'm not sure what you're doing, other than trading, but if you're also working aside that, go look for a new job and try and get yourself some equity. Because there's lots of great companies, by the way, in Chicago, a lot of big tech companies and companies raising money right now where you can, latch onto some of those sweet options.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Carol. It's Matt, West Coast Closer. Very nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on. I'll start with Bears fan. I hear
Bears and Raiders, yes.
Bears and Raiders. I'm Buffalo Bills season ticket holder for 13 years now. So
Very nice, very
um,
nice. I'm also deeply entrenched as a Blackhawks fan as well,
yep.
and I'm very angry at the Cubs. So
Oh
that
my
gives
gosh.
you a sense of my sports scenario today.
I
Rizzo
think you guys got a
Bryant.
disgruntled goalie coming in there now too. So let's see how Fleury works out.
Well, it's good. We got Fleury, and we have this young guy, Kevin Lankinen, who's a rookie and is very talented. So I feel okay with our goalie situation.
For sure, for sure. Well, yeah, I'll be in there. I'll be back. I'll be in Chicago actually in October to watch Packers and Bears. So we'll see then maybe. Um, my question is, I just kind of I put it together today. So with the continued growth and acceptance we're seeing of the Web 3.0 generation, with more and more people being educated and it coming up to more of the forefront, not only with platforms and coins, et cetera, but rather the integration of the blockchain into large businesses. And we're seeing in many ways with payment processes, optimizing the business processes, enhanced security. These sort of measures are really, making some of these big box stores, bigger, larger firms more attractive to people to put their money in, invest in, to look at. So, and it reduces all the costs, ensuring transactions go quickly. With all that said, and to see where we're going with the integration and education of the Web3 generation with blockchain and so forth, what are your thoughts with how it's going to affect smaller businesses keeping up due to like they're all usually going to be behind, less capital to be able to incorporate these sort of things into their businesses,
Yeah, I mean
essentially.
this is such a good rallying cry for the people who are doing things with crypto and blockchain to not forget about small businesses and remembering that there's so many of them and that they're such a large part and important part of the economy. And again, all the issues that go along with the centralized power. But you hit a big nail on the head. I mean, small businesses, because I mean, even before COVID, it's so hard for them to do all the things that they had to do. They're at a capital disadvantage. They do tend to be behind the curve from a technological standpoint. And then now, they've got, if they've even survived the mandates, they're dealing with inflation, they're dealing with supply chain issues, they're dealing with labor. And so, anything that, the community can do to help educate small business, I think is going to be to the benefit of, crypto and blockchain doing what it's intended to do. Because if it's just facilitating big guys getting bigger, then you end up with a no good deed goes unpunished situation. So I think it's a really important point and a really good rallying cry to get more small business owners. And certainly, they're probably not doing it this year and maybe not next year, but hopefully things, start to even out a little bit, especially with the labor market, maybe or if you can show them, how it's going to help them revitalize their business and get back, maybe you can get some attention on that now. But it does create a challenge because there's only so many resources to go around, and the small business owner does have the disadvantages of that tilted playing field, and then just sort of the natural issues that go along with being small and competing. So I think it is an important point to try to be inclusive and think about how you can bring more small businesses into the fold. It will be to everybody's benefit to do so.
Wow.
Th- Thank you very much.
Wow, Matt. This question is for you. Where the hell did you get that question from? That was amazing.
Hey, I'm interested in
Yeah.
these things, and I'm a big believer. Like
Listen.
I'm looking towards the future big time, and I believe that the Web 3.0, you know, generation is upon us, and some of these early investments and deep research I'm doing now to invest in certain where this will benefit me. That's where I'm looking, and I believe it's going to become more and more to the forefront. And then coming up on obviously Carol's fight for small businesses. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a continued struggle, like she said, and if we can, shine light on it, help out where we can with our small businesses, local, That's it's gonna be something to keep them afloat against these bigger juggernauts. So thank you, Carol. Great question. Great answer.
No, no, that was a great question. And actually, since
That,
you kind of talk about, and you guys are
mhm.
interested in investments, you're talking about Web 3.0 as kind of a potential investment thesis. The other place I would encourage you guys, if there's an interest in, kind of doing research and thinking about like what's going to be the future, what we've seen with technology and the internet over the past 20 years, I think you're going to start to see that kind of innovation happen throughout healthcare over the next 20 years. So I think that the kinds of crazy innovations and some of the kind of healthcare and biotech technologies that are out there, there's a lot of really crazy stuff that's going to be happening. A lot of wealthy people who will certainly see the benefit in investing and making those things happen. So if you're looking for big, like, what's the next big investment thesis, that would be a place that I would start investigating for some of your longer term investment plays.
Wow.
Thank you.
Can I
Perfect.
add on to that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to say
Um,
that Ape Average has a question, but yeah, West Coast Closer just comes out a beast every week with new info.
I
Go
just
ahead,
wanted
Ape
to say
Average.
the whole thing with the crypto. I feel like it will be implemented into like you said, like hospitals. There's so many different ways and sources it can be used, and I've been looking into Web3 now for probably 6 or 9 months. I mean, I mine crypto myself,
Mm.
so I'm pretty knowledgeable within the whole system, and it's pretty amazing what you can do with Web3 and where we're going to be going in the future. And like you're saying, AI, all sorts of things. Like we're 20 years ahead of, like, this stuff is out and it's being created and it's happening right now. We just don't see it, and it's pretty wild.
Yeah,
And
I
I
mean,
wanted to thank you for hosting this and everything you've done for the community as well.
oh, you're a sweetheart, and I'm so interested in that. And I would say, like, you're doing this deep dive. Like, I'm always interested in like new ideas and things like that. So you guys all have access to me, whether it's Twitter or via email. Like, throw stuff to me and just be like, hey, look about this, or what do you think of this thesis? So I love having those high level conversations. So as you're
I'll be in touch.
uncovering things, yeah, please do. I love the dialogue, and yeah, love to be ahead of the curve on things.
Yeah, that's a very complicated thing to do, but that's what we're shooting for here.
Amazing Ape Average. And then we have Mercury.
Hi, thank you for hosting. Carol, I was listening to Elon Musk, Jack Dorsey, and Kathy Woods, and they were talking about deflation. Do you think we're primed for that?
Hi, vey. Okay. I love it's like, can you explain deflation versus inflation in 5 words? Go. No, it's actually a really great question. And I think it depends on whether you're looking short term or long term. And I also think there are a lot of variables that can impact this. We are in a historic time where the level of central bank intervention, as well as government spending, much of which has been monetized by the central bank, is unprecedented. So the amount of outcomes just from that, plus the potential policies that could come out that impact things, I think can create a sort of a range of outcomes. And I talk about in this book, and the range of outcomes start at deflation and go up to, hyperinflation. The place I've been talking about for about a year or so that I see potentially as the most likely outcome, at least over the next, like, call it year to year and a half, is stagflation. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, it's sort of a phenomenon that doesn't happen a lot. We saw it last, I think, in the late 70s, early 80s. But it's this sort of confluence of events where we have inflation in terms of prices and wages and whatnot. But the economy itself stagnates, so that inflation isn't accompanied by growth in the economy. It's really accompanied by a stagnating economy. And I think that all of this central planning intervention that has disrupted everything, from supply chains to the labor markets, kind of on down the line, coupled with the monetary policies decisions, and then some of the government money giveaways that has increased the money supply to this sort of epic proportion, I think, at least in the short term, potentially ends up with stagflation. And certainly, on the short term inflation side, we're seeing it. We're seeing just in terms of the Fed's predictions of the PCE index, they had said by the end of 2021, a year ago, that they were expecting that to be about 1.6%. They bumped that up to 1.8% in December. This past June, they bumped that up to 3.4%. The run rate is over 6%, and people are saying that potentially could end up over 9%. And, that's probably because, it's a government number, and they do a lot of kind of shenanigans to keep that down. I mean, we all go to grocery stores and get gas and whatnot and can see the short-term inflation effects. And I personally think, even though some of the elements might be transitory, that we're going to see the impact from what they did in the labor market. That it's not like you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to now pay you $15 or $20 or $25 an hour to come back in the labor force, and then go, okay, just kidding, now I'm going to move you down to 12. Like, I just don't see that as a viable alternative. So I think with that huge amount of disconnect in the labor force and the huge amount of openings, that we're going to have inflation for some period of time. Now, whether kind of looking at the macro issues, we end up in a long-term deflationary standpoint, I certainly think that is a possible outcome, again, because we're in this unprecedented situation. But there are so many factors that could impact that. What the Fed does in the short term, some of these government policies that are put out, other things that happen around the world. I can't project out that far, but at least in the interim, my best guess is stagflation.
Thank you for taking my question. I'll step off.
So, Carol, I have another question.
Ooh.
Me and you, yeah, I have the best questions, right?
You
You're the
already
host,
asked
of
her.
course
You
you
can't
do.
ask her another one. I'm just kidding.
Listen. So, yeah, we talked earlier. When we talked earlier, we talked about people coming from, certain backgrounds and situations, and maybe feeling stuck in their situations. Middle class, lower class. What advice do you have for those people trying to change their economic status and elevate in the world today?
Yeah. So I am living proof. As I said, neither of my parents went to college. I have a level of success that, like, if I told my parents this, both my parents unfortunately are passed, but if they had lived to see this, or if I had told them this, like, they would have been like, yeah, okay, whatever, girl. Like, they said, you're gonna be successful. You're not gonna be that successful. But the opportunities are still there if you're willing to put in the work, and you're willing to be smart about it, and you're willing to be patient, and you're willing to do the right things. And where you stand today does not matter, where you end up tomorrow. Reinvention opportunities are available to you any day and every day. So wherever you're starting from today, it does not determine your outcome. But if you want to prioritize wealth, which, again, it doesn't have to be your priority. It could be flexibility. It could be passion. I mean, these are all parts of capitalism and free choice. But if it is wealth creation, if that's an important thing to you, then you, again, need to be strategic about it. If you're young, my husband and I like to kind of say, like, the trajectory, like, 20s, your 20s is like when you get in the game. The 30s is like when you hone your skills, and your 40s is when you create wealth. It doesn't mean that you can't do that earlier, but that's just kind of the trajectory that, like, we've seen from other folks. But you can change those up at any point in time. And if you are somebody who cares and is willing to put in the work, you're going to be, like, light years ahead of everyone else. So the things that you need to be looking for is just getting in the game. And it doesn't matter, again, like, where you came from, what you want to do. Just pick something that you want to do, or pick anything. Get in the game, learn the game, and then, like, become the best at that game. And along the way, try to get that equity ownership, because that's going to really help create those opportunities. And so if you don't know where to look at venture capital backed companies, look at private equity backed companies. These are the types of companies that have the capital to grow. They're bringing on people, and they're used to having people participate in the growth. Even if it's a publicly traded company, you can still ask for equity, although you potentially may have a different risk opportunity depending on how mature that company is. But go in, do that, take that as far as you can go, then go and do the next one and do the next one. Or if you want to build your own business, that's fantastic, and be investing in other things along the way, and just chart out, like, where is it you want to be, and work backwards, break that down into little chunks, but like, just have the mindset of like, I can do this, and I'm willing to do this, and ask the questions. And I have no doubt every single person here who's shown up, who's listening, if you want to do that, you can do that, and don't let anyone else tell you you can't. And if anyone tells you that you can't, you come to me and I will talk you out of that.
Amazing. Break the cycle.
Thank you.
Here's what I keep telling people: don't eat the rich, be the rich. Be the rich. Okay?
Yeah,
I want you to all to be the rich.
Yes.
I love that. And then we have one last question from the audience. Dr. Pub, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much. I just kind of combining the last two questions. I was kind of curious your take on the whole idea of being an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter if you're starting a small business, doesn't matter if you have a great idea and you're trying to execute, but being an entrepreneur and its inherent uncertainty combined with what could be magnitudes more uncertainty in the current environment. I mean, what's your take on has the game changed?
100%. And if you read the book, The War on Small Business, I talk about this. I had written another book 10 years prior called The Entrepreneur Equation, which was about how difficult it is to be a small business owner in the United States of America. And I didn't think that like the number one risk was going to be the government coming in and shutting you down and not appropriately compensating you for basically taking your property rights under the concept of eminent domain. So that this has completely shifted the game. But it's also accelerated some of the things that we already knew. We knew that having a consumer facing business that was in a physical location constrained your growth potential more than being a web-based business. And this has made that much more apparent. So I think in terms of being an entrepreneur, look, if you're entrepreneurial, like, you're going to be an entrepreneur. And so you need to find out if you want to do that inside somebody else's company. Again, this goes back to risk taking. Is this something you want to do in somebody else's company where somebody else's financial stakes on the line? Is this something where you feel like you need to drive it yourself? And then you need to now put additional risk into the equation and go, okay, here are the new things that are on the table. And, how should I approach my business knowing that there is now more risk? Is there enough reward? Am I thinking big enough? Because now I know there's much more risk than there was even, 16 months ago or 17 months ago. So I think that there still remains opportunities, and there still are wealth creation opportunities, but they're making it harder. And so you have to take that into consideration. But people, small business and sort of like tech entrepreneurship is very, very different. And I think people pursue them for different reasons. And I always go back again to sort of the wealth creation and innovation versus, passion, liking to do something, wanting flexibility, wanting something to call your own. So I think you really need to sit down and go like, why am I doing this? And making sure that you have that risk reward balance that makes sense given your objective. And if you don't have that, then wait till you find the right concept, where you feel like you do have that. And again, there are different ways to be entrepreneurial as well. So I would just kind of keep all those things in mind and talk those out, amongst your peers and your friends.
All right. Well, thank you, Carol. I didn't know if you had anything to add, but thank you for being being a woman in this space. It's so hard to, be as outspoken as you are and just so amazing and full of information and knowledge for everybody in this space. And before we close out, I would like you to just go ahead and give us like a cliff notes to what your book is about and how it pertains to, like why these investors in crypto and stocks should get your book and where they could get your book, how they could get a hold of you. And yeah.
All right. Well, great. So I'm really bad at following instructions. So I'm going to first respond to the first piece of that, and then I will get around to actually answering your questions. So I think that's the hallmark of an entrepreneur, right? Just you do it, and then you beg for forgiveness later. But the first piece is that, I appreciate the opportunity with, two strong women who've invited me on here to have this discussion. I will tell you, and I alluded to it earlier, is like I don't consider myself a woman something. Like I'm very individualistic. I don't walk around with, kind of any labels on me. So it's true. But I think I mentioned this to Dal earlier too, is like when I go to speak at a women's conference, I always say, like, I hope this conference doesn't exist in a couple years. Like, I hope it's just a conference, right? And it's not a women's
Absolutely.
conference. And I
Yeah.
can tell you, as somebody who's sat on boards of directors and whatnot, like, I never want anybody to think that I'm there because I'm like checking a box. Like, to build consensus, to be effective, I have to be there on merit. And so I just try to view everybody as an individual. I keep the lens and try to be aware of, being as inclusive as possible. But again, as individuals that have different things that they bring to things. So don't walk around with the burden of you are in anything other than an individual who's going to go out there and kick butt. So that's my little soapbox moment. In terms of the book, again, the war on small business, it's very important to understand what has happened in terms of our move from free markets towards decentralization. It's very important to understand what happened in the last year that facilitated the wealth transfer. It's very important to understand the role the Federal Reserve plays. It's very important to understand what's happened over decades, including our relationship with China, that has sort of informed this exporting of capitalism and this importing of central planning. And so if you're somebody who believes in freedom and choice and transparency, if you want to have economic freedom, if you want to have wealth creation opportunities available to everybody and not just people in the club, you need to read the book to understand what's been happening, to have that education, to be able to speak on it, and to be able to take action. And that's what I hope to inspire. And I also want to say this is not partisan. We live in a world that like everything is partisan, and this isn't. This is about being an individual who wants to have the individual rights and the economic freedom and those opportunities available to everybody. So I don't care where you stand on the political spectrum, there's an opportunity for us to all come together, regardless of that, and regardless of, where our entry point is, whether it's small business, whether it's crypto, whether it's gig economy, whether it's decentralized media. There's an opportunity for us to come together as individuals and stand shoulder to shoulder and be strong in numbers, but still retaining that individuality, which is so important.
Thank you so much, Carol. And then once again, where can we get your book?
Yes. So book wherever fine books are sold, but if you want to support a small business bookseller, you can check out bookshop.org, or you can walk your little tooties over to the local small business retailer of your choice.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carol. And we appreciate you for coming on with us. You are so full of knowledge, and we've learned so much. And we all appreciate you. You guys make sure you guys give Carol a follow and make sure to buy her book. And next week, we'll be having Zach Morris on the show.
Zach Morris. Woo! Y'all
Awesome.
better show up. Thank you,
Yes.
Carol. You're
Thank you
like my
so
kindred
much.
spirit.
Yes, we
You're like
love
my
you.
kindred spirit. Go ahead and follow me.
I will do that.
So,
And thank you. And again, thanks to everybody. Thanks to the whole panel, but especially to you, Christine, and to you, Doll. Like, you guys have been amazing. Thanks for including me, reaching out to me, and for doing that. I mean, what a wonderful thing that you're doing for the community. And big props to both of you. And if I can ever be supportive, just holler at me.
Amazing.
oh, I
Thank you so
will.
much, Carol.
I
Thank you.
bet you will, right?
All right, Carol.
I know, it's like Dell's taking notes. She's like, okay, here's how to get to be the
No, because
mentee. Okay, I'm going to go
Carol,
in with this.
yes, like Carol, I have made you my friend, so this is what it is. Accept it.
I love it. I love it. And thank you all. Thanks to everybody who showed up and stuck with us and listened. Like, this was a really good first experience. So I
Yes.
can say I don't have to
Thank
be
you.
embarrassed and like share, like, oh, like that first experience was something I don't want to
No,
talk about. So,
it was
yeah.
so good.
Yeah, it was
It was
amazing.
so
I love it.
amazing. Thank you so much, guys, and have an amazing trading week. And thank you, Carol. We'll be in touch. Thank you for coming on. Thank
All right.
you.
Go get
Thank
that
you,
Toodles.
cash,
Thank
Carol.
you,
everyone.
Carol.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a good
Bye.
night, guys.
Have a great night.
See you
Have
at
a
the
good week,
see you at the
everyone.
bell tomorrow, everybody.
Let's do it.